minute, in the next 1 minute, I'll be able to stream it on YouTube. It's been set up. So while we are waiting for that, the class is about to start, and I would not want anyone to disturb my class. So please kindly mute yourselves, all right?
Just waste of data.
Yes, calm down now.
What's going on in this place like this? It's not your voice.
Hello, I've just shared a link, a YouTube link, please. Hello, those that are sending messages on the via the chat should please pause that for now so that you can help me share the YouTube link to your colleagues, all right? So I just posted the YouTube link via the chat, so everyone should be able to access it.
Alpha one, I make noise now. Waiting they do now. You see.
Yes, can we see my screen? So can we all see my screen?
You mind they ask question? Okay.
Yes.
Mute your mic. Hey, Jesus.
Okay, so you are welcome to today's class. Please mute yourselves, please.
From Timmy, collect this bro. One heart smash ahead, but not too bad.
Okay, so on this slide we have the learning objectives of this class. After this class, I expect everyone to be able to understand the concept of programming, understand the benefits of using Microsoft Windows as an classification tool. Able to understand the fundamentals of designing, implementing, and distributing a visual basic application. So without wasting much time, I believe we are all familiar with what we call a program. Before now, you've had other lecturers who took you some
No, you can't.
semesters
My
on
it's
this course. I believe that you should be able to understand what a program is now. We know that a program, we say a program in computer science, a program is a sequence of instructions to solve what particular problem. A program basically is a sequence of instructions to solve a particular problem. So many of us might ask me, how do you so many programming
as a computer,
languages
people need to
to
people
write
know
a program? You
people
have
are talking.
problem that you are trying to solve. You
That
can write a program to solve that problem. Languages can be used for that include Java, you have C++, you have Visual Basic. We refer to them
Please
as
mute
high-level
everyone. We can't
languages.
hear you.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Please mute yourselves. Mute yourselves. I don't know. I'm trying to mute everyone from here, but it's not muting everyone. Please kindly mute yourselves so that you can enjoy the class better, please. So, like I said, a program can be written using any of the high-level programming languages. You can make use of Java. You can make use of C Sharp. You have C++. You have Visual Basic, and many more languages. Okay. So anyway, a person who writes a program is called a programmer. I know you would have might have been referring to some of your classmates as, oh, you are a programmer, you're a programmer. So anyone that writes a program is what is a programmer. So to solve a problem, when you are trying to solve a problem, it is important for you to devise an algorithm. I believe you'd have been told or you'd have been taught that an algorithm you would have been taught that an algorithm is a step-by-step procedure, right? A step-by-step procedure on how to solve a problem. So when you want to solve a problem, it is important for you to list those steps that will be involved in solving that problem. So we refer to those steps as an algorithm. So generally, when you want to solve a problem, you have these four major steps to follow. Before you can solve a problem, it is important for you to understand what problem you are trying to solve. So you have to understand the problem. That's the first of the four major steps that involved in solving a problem. After this, you have to devise a good plan to solve the problem. So here you can come up with an algorithm. You can make use of structured English. You can come up with a flow chart. Do you get it? So you just have to come up with a method on how you can solve that problem. So you draft a plan on how to solve the problem. Once you draft the plan to solve the problem, next thing is to what? Is to implement the plan. This is where programming actually comes in. You can see this particular part has been burdened. That's where the programming aspect comes in. Before you don't just start writing a program. It is important for you to understand what problem you are trying to solve. And before you write the program at the same time, it's important for you to understand how you want to solve that problem. So meaning that you must have a plan on how you can solve that problem. And after that, you have to evaluate it. So evaluation means you are trying to check if the program is efficient and what effective. Is the program doing what it's supposed to do? So this is what you look at under what solution evaluation. All right. So before I start talking about Visual Basic as a programming language, it's important for us to understand some facts about programming. As you can see on this particular slide, is programming for a special kind of people. I know we have students from different departments. Some might be asking that, why? I'm not in computer science, so why am I being told to learn about how you write a program? Don't let me deceive you. Programming is not for So programming is not just for a special kind of people. What this means is that programming is not just for computer scientists or engineers. Anyone can be a programmer. I have seen students who are from business administration and are doing very well in the programming field. I have a number of them who are what? Programmers. And I know that if you make your research, you will find out that programmers are widely recognized and are one of the best paid people, employees in the world. When you look at top companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and the likes, if you can research on that, you will see how much they pay programmers. So I would want every one of you to take this class very important and not think that you are not a computer scientist and you don't actually need to learn a program. I believe you know about the likes of Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Tony Young, as you can see on the slide. So you can make your research about them. All these people that I just mentioned, if you make your research, you will find out that they are all richer than Africa's richest man. And when these guys come into limelight, there are some of them that came into limelight like 10 to 15 years ago. And Dangote has been in business for close to 30, 40, yeah, about 30 years, I think. And these guys who just started recently are part of the wealthiest people in the world. Hello, are we together? So with programming, you have ATM, all thanks to programming. You have banking applications, you have commercial applications, operating system, you can use your phone, you have mobile applications, you have applications on your mobile devices and all, game applications and all. So with this, I believe you agree with me that programming is everything. Okay, so let's just look at a brief history of basic. Visual Basic. How did it come about? Basic. There was a language called Basic, which was developed in early 1960s by Dartmouth College. And Basic actually stands for Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code. It was developed as an answer to complicated programming languages such as Fortran, Formula Translator, Argol, COBOL, and the likes. So without wasting much time, we had some early versions of Basic before we now have what we call Visual Basic, which was introduced in 1991. I believe when we say visual, we know what visual means. So anything visual is what can be seen.
Bro,
So
this extra.
VB as a programming language consists of tools that allow you to develop Windows applications. When I say Windows applications, I mean GUI applications. And GUI stands for Graphical User Interface. So they have these applications have a familiar appearance to the user. VB has two major components. So what are the two major components of Visual Basic? We'll find out that the two major components of the Visual Basic are controls and what commands. So a control is just a graphical object, an object such as a text box or a label or a button. So you can actually drag this to your form. When you say an interface, for example, looking at the ATM interface, you would see that I think the first interface will welcome you once you slot in your ATM card. Welcome this person. It asks you what operation do you want to perform. Then based on the operation you select, it brings out an interface for you. If you want to withdraw, you see that the interface to make a withdrawal is different from the interface to check your account balance. So depending on the kind of operation that you are trying to perform, so that would determine the kind of interface that you have at a particular point in time. And we have commands. A command is just an instruction that is issued by the user, which causes the VB to perform an action. When I click on withdrawal, you see, when I click on withdrawal, an action is performed. It asks me, how much do you want to withdraw? Do you get it? Is it 5,000? Is it 10,000? When I click on transfer funds, the interface that appears is different. It's asking me for the account number of the recipient. That's the person I'm trying to make a transfer to, the amount I'm trying to transfer to that person. So depending on the operation that you're trying to perform, that's what determines the interface that appears to you as a user. So Visual Basic is an event-driven programming language. What this actually means, from the name event-driven, that means an event must take place before an action is performed. So what this means actually is that if Visual Basic is event-driven, it means that the code remains idle until called upon to respond to somewhat event. It could be that you pressed a button or you selected something, so it responds based on what you have selected, which and this is governed by an event processor. So an event is an action that is recognized by an object. Don't worry, we'll write a few codes. So these codes will help us to understand what we mean by controls and commands. So just have it at the back of your mind. Like control is a graphical object that you can drag and drop on your form. So we'll see what a form is, we'll see what a text is, we'll see what a label is, and we'll see what a button is. We have different kinds of buttons. So as we proceed, we get to understand some of these better. So you can see on this slide, I have some interfaces. I have that of the ATM, the first that picture where you have a red background. I think that's the first interface that appears to you when you slot in your ATM card that you want to perform an operation. It asks you for your PIN. So you can see after the PIN has been entered, we have another interface that tells us to select a transaction. So I have a third interface that tells us to what, which is for transferring funds. Now you see that each of these is called an interface, all right? So each of these is an interface. But let's look at this particular interface where we have transfer funds. You would see that here we have I have destination bank here. There is a there is a column here that tells me to select the bank. Here I have account number. There is a field here, a text box that tells me to enter the account number. Here we have account type. Here tells me to what? To enter the type of account. Is it savings? Is it current or any other type of account? Then the beneficiary name. So this is where I enter the beneficiary name. I have the amount. So looking at this particular interface, for example, we can see on this interface that we have what we call a text box. Please kindly mute yourselves. I'm trying to mute everyone, but I don't know why that is. I
It's
select mute
supposed to remain
all.
five. I'm
Some
not
people are
lying.
still able
I drank only
to type this
one.
thing. And your lie, though, please mute yourself, okay?
I did not take it. If I want to take, I'll put some in my class. And my class is there. I block it when I don't want her to bring anything. I was going
So the latest several versions of Visual Basic has been released, but the most recent one is VB6, which was the final released version, and it was released in 1998. It's simply known now as Visual Basic. In 2008, Microsoft stopped supporting VB6 IDE. So now, what is an IDE? IDE stands for what? Integrated Development Environment. Now, before you can write your code, okay, you must have what you call the IDE, which helps you to what? Write your code. Without the IDE, when I want to write a code in, let's take for instance, when I want to write a code in Python, Python is one of the high-level programming languages that we have. And I want to write a code in Python. I have to use an IDE that recognizes Python codes. The same thing happens when you're trying to write a VB application. You have to use an IDE that recognizes Visual Basic as a programming language. So we have Microsoft developed Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is robust, and with Visual Studio you have a number of languages that you can work with. So Visual Studio provides support for Visual Basic. So with Visual Studio you can write your Visual Basic programs. Also, I have a portable version that you can. There's a portable version that you can download from the internet. So let me just show you that. You can share it with some of your class reps. So this is what the portable version looks like. I have to minimize this. So you can see Basic 6.0 portable. So you can this, it helps you to run your Visual Basic programs as well. So I will launch it later as we proceed. So let's go back to the slide. Right. So and a VB, this slide shows us what a VB application interface looks like. So I will run this. Okay. So I will run that later. So this is what a VB application interface looks like. Here we have the title bar. Here we have the title bar. We have the menu bar. We have this as the toolbar. Everything else the toolbox. So once I launch it, we'll understand it better. But before I do so, let's see what the VB application interface looks like. So here we have the form window. So when I want to develop an interface, design what that interface should look like. Once I've successfully designed what the interface should look like, and start writing what we're going to see what is done in this class. This as the properties window. This will be explained in the next slide. We have this as the project window. So we have this part as the form layout window. So whatever is it that I'm designing, this form layout window can help me to see what the interface is look like. When I want to write a VB application, now, hello, mute yourselves if you have not done that. Let's go back to the ATM application interface once more. See, the first interface that appears to me when I want to perform any transaction is, let's say, a welcome page. You can see that like a form. So that welcome page, you can design a page like that as a form. Once I click on once I enter my password and click on enter, that interface appears. That is another form in the Visual Basic. So each interface is represented as a form in the Visual Basic. So when I have an application, looking at the ATM application, for instance, we have so many interfaces. Each of these interfaces can be designed as a form. Then we just link all the forms together to form a whole application, also a project. So here you can see we have three. This is just a simple application. We have three forms. So the forms are presented together. Maybe form one might be the home interface. Just look, for instance, a number of you have visited one or two or one or more websites. Looking at Unilag website, for example, we have the home page, which is the first page that appears to you when you visit the website using the URL unilag.edu.ng. So if you are a student and you want to probably log into your portal, you click on students. If I am a staff, I'll click on staff. You see that the interface that appears to the staff is different from the interface that appears to the what? To the student. So each interface is represented as a form. The home page can be seen like a form. On that form, we have several links to the staff page, student page, parent page, etc., news and others. So when I click on news, I know that's like clicking on that link takes me to another form because every interface is form. So when you want to develop an application in Visual Basic, we have three primary steps that are involved in doing that. The first thing is to draw your interface, create a form. object interface. Then you set properties or assign properties to these controls. Do not forget that a control is just any of those objects there. It can be a label, it can be a text box, it can be a command button, and others. After you have drawn your interface, after you have drawn the interface and assigned properties to those controls, you can attach code to the controls. So now let's see. I think I've explained this particular slide. This is just telling us what the VB application program looks like. So we have the title bar, as you can see, is clearer here. We have the menu bar. After that, we have the toolbars. Those are the three components that we have on this particular slide. This is what a Chrome window looks like.
That's
It
an
is central to developing what Visual Basic applications. This is where you draw your application. So now let's okay. So I've been mentioning toolbox. This the toolbox is the selection menu for controls used in the application. You can see we have labels, we have text box, we have frame, command button, option button, list box, combo box, all that. So these are all examples of controls that are used in Visual Basic. So this is what the every control. Remember, I said you can assign properties to the control. So this is what the properties windows look like. We have this simple calculator drawing controls to be done in class. This will involve the use of selection statements, but I won't introduce us to that yet. So let me just come up with a simpler code. Let's look at a code. Now, let's say we want to find the circumference of a circle. Let's say we want to find the circumference or area of a circle. Write the code. Let's just look at what interface will look like, because before I can write the code, some terminologies that we introduce in this class, like variables, types, the likes. Now,
We can't see you anymore.
Can't hear that also. It's not. Wait, I'm not
so before I proceed, let me check. Um, Hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me clearly now? Please respond via the chat. Okay, you can hear me. All right, all right. Thank you. Okay, so I said let's look at what the interface. Let's look at an interface to find the area and circumference of a circle. So before I do that, I said you can use your Visual Studio, and you can download a portable file, a VB6 portable file on the internet. So we call it Visual Basic 6.0 portable. So this is it that I've downloaded, and the size is just 6 MB. So now let me launch that. So once you launch it, you click on Run Visual Basic. So I am running Visual Basic now. and is on standard exe. So you select. You can see, I think I showed us this. You can see what we have here. I told you there will be a project. You have the title bar, which is here. We have the menu bar, which is this. We have the toolbar, which is this. We have the toolbox, which is this. I told you that once you launch it, a Windows form will appear. So we have that here. We have the properties for the form here. So if in case you want to change anything about the form, you can do that here. You can give the form a name. So you can simply give it a name. So we can give it a name. So let's say this form is just to calculate what? The area and circumference of a circle. So I can say circumference. You can see this is where I'm setting the properties for my object. So I'm setting the properties. We have a particular property called caption for what? For my form. So it helps me to change the name of the form. When you just say a caption is like a descriptive text, all right? So I'm trying to give the form a what? A descriptive text. So anyone that sees this interface would understand what this is supposed to what? To do. So circumference and area, all right? So we have circumference and area. Now, before you can write a program, it is important for you to understand what the interface would look like. Now, for the interface, we have three of the most commonly used objects. Now, let me just put it to you this way. When I was talking about the objects, we have a number of objects. We have frame, option button, command button, text box, label, and the likes. So we have a number of what? We have a number of these objects, but three of the most commonly used objects are label, text box, and command button. It does not mean that you can't use the other ones. Don't get me wrong. I said three of the most commonly used labels are what? So three of the most commonly used controls or objects are label, text box, and command button. Now I want to write a program, or I just want to design an interface. I'm still at the interface design stage. So I want to design an interface to calculate the circumference and area of a circle. Now, remember that for me to be able to calculate the area and circumference of a circle, I must have what we call the radius. I as a user must supply the what? The radius. So the text box can be used to supply an input. Anytime you want to supply an input, you can make use of the text box to what? To supply an input. So let's see how that is done. A label can be used to what? To give a description of what is being expected, or to just give a descriptive text, or to attach a descriptive text. Do you get it? To your program. For example, if you are trying to when you are trying to fill your biodata form, you will see something like name, right? You will see name, and there's a space or there's a box where you enter your name. You can see something like email. Beside it, you will see a box, a text box that allows you to what? To enter your email. If you want to select your gender, you will see that there they hardly use a text box to input your gender. You see that you'll see one round button like this. You call it an option button. This button, you will see they would have put it male or female. So anyone you click, that's the value that is assigned to what? To the variable that will hold whatever value you are supplying at that point. So now, like I said, the label helps us to give what? A descriptive message, all right? So the text box allows us to what? To input a value. The text box actually receives a value from the what? From the user. I can also use it to display my output depending on how I have designed it. And we have a command button. You see that once you have entered all your details on that form, you can then click on submit, which sends your what? Your details to a database or wherever you want the information to go to. So now, let's just look at a simple interface for the circumference and area of a circle. So like I said, all I just need to do is click on my control, and I'll drag it to the form. You can see here I have label 1, but because I want the user to know that, oh, this is not just label 1. What I want you to do is what? Enter radius. So the label is just to add a descriptive message. So you can see, I will come to the property of that label. So I want to change the caption of that label. There is every label has a caption property that tells you the text that will be attached to that label. Every label has a particular property that helps you to what? To change the text, do you get it, of that label. We have several other properties, but one that is most important, or one of the most important that we can't do without, is the what? Is the caption property. So now I have enter radius. This is to let whoever wants to write or run this code know what he or she is supposed to what to do. Enter radius. You can see that the caption for the label has changed here. So when I click on it, I always click on the object. So this tells me the name of the what object. I can't change it. So this is what label 1. Okay, I can change it from here. Yes, you can change it from here. But let's just leave it as what? As label 1. So we have added a label to what? To our form. So now, like I told you, I said the text box helps us to receive input. So let me add a text box to receive my radius. You can see. So if I want to increase the width or the height, I can always do that. So if I want to increase the width, all I just need to do is to click on this button, then I'll drag it to the right to increase the width. So if you want to increase the height, you drag it down. So whichever way you want it to be. Now, I told you that caption is what helps the label to give it a descriptive text. So this text box is meant to capture an input from the user. So I don't want to call it, there should be no value there. So text box, or you call it text, some call it text box, some call it text, does not have the caption property. So a property, text has what? The property for text is what? Text. So if you scroll down, you will see that text, there is no caption for that. So if I scroll down, I will see text. You can see I have text here. So all I need to do is to change that, because that is supposed to receive a value from my user. So I don't want anything to be there. What I have by the left has told me that I need to enter a radius here. So the radius will be entered here, right? And remember that I want to calculate the area and circumference of what? Of the circle. But before I can do that, the user must supply an input, which is the what? The radius. So now, I told you a label helps to give a descriptive text to what? To my program. So now, let me add another label. You will see that the name of this label will be called label 2. You can see the name is what? Label 2. I want to change the caption because I want the user to know that the caption for this is area. So I can easily change the caption to what? To area, or area is, or whatever I want it to be. So area is equal to area is. So you can see the caption for that label has changed. So if I want to minimize the size or reduce the size, I can always do that. So I want my area to be displayed in what? In the text box. If I want it to be displayed in a text box, all I need to do is what? Add another text box. You see that the name of this text box by default will be text 2. So this is what? Text 2. So I want this to capture my area. Okay, so I want this to capture my area. Like I said, text does not have the caption property, but the text has what? A text property. So you can see, I want to change the name because this is where I want my area to be displayed. So I'm not putting any text there. It should be empty so that the value of the area can be calculated and displayed in that text box. So also, I will need a label for my circumference. So I can add a new label. So I can call that label 3. So we have that as label 3. So let's we have this as label 3. To add the text to my label, we know it's caption, not text. If it is text box, it is text. But if it is label, we have what? We have text. So for label 3, I want it to have circumference is. Okay, so we have that. So I need a text box to what? To display my circumference. So I can add another text box to that. So let me add a text box to display my circumference. So the text box, like I said, has the text property, so I can change that to empty so that the value of my circumference can be calculated and stored in that text box. But remember I said the three most important properties are what? Controls or objects are labels, text boxes, and command button. Now, this program cannot execute, or this program will not run until you add, your program will not run until you add what is called a command button. It is that, remember we said Visual Basic is event driven, so that once I click this command button, from the name command button, that's what tells, do you get it? That's what lets the program know what it's supposed to what it's supposed to do. It's a command button. Once I click, that means this program now is not going to run until I have a command button. So you can see the icon for the command button. So you can see once you hover your mouse around the toolbox, you will see the name of each of the components. You can see this is an option button, but what I need here is a command button, because without the command button, the code cannot run. So now I need to add a command button, which is what I will click before an action is performed. So now this command button also has what we call the caption. So I can always change the name. The default name is command, then the numeric value of the command that you are adding, is it command 1? If I try to add a new command, I have command 2. If I try to add a new command, I have command 3. Do you get it? So I can add as many commands as I want. So the caption for this, so that whoever is going to click this can understand what the command is supposed to do. So I would write, let me say calculate, because what I want to do is to calculate the area and circumference of a circle. Sorry, the L key is not working. So I have what? Calculate. You can see the name has changed. I have calculate. I can also have a button. So this is you can always add as many buttons as you want. So I can add a button that, okay, you know what? So maybe I want to clear all the values of my, or in each of the text boxes. I can enter my radius. I click on calculate. Okay, it will calculate my area and calculate my circumference. Maybe I now want to clear all the values. I want to clear the radius that has been entered. I want to clear the area. I want to clear the circumference. So I can add another command and call it, let's say, clear. So I know what this command is supposed to do. This command is just meant to clear all the values that we have in our text boxes. All right, so I'll call that clear. And I can also add, remember I said you can add as many buttons as you want. I can add another button, let's call it end. That's when I want to close that program. So I can call it end. So to just close the program. So I can add that as well. A command button helps the what? Helps you to perform an action. So let me call this exit or end. That means I will change the caption so that the person running the program can understand what that is doing as well. So this is what the interface will look like. This is just a simple interface to calculate what circumference and area. What objects did I use? I have a label here, label 1. I have another label here, label 2. I have a label here, label 3. I have a text box here to receive my input. I have a text box here to what? To display my area. I have a text box here to display my circumference. I have a command button here, which is called calculate. So this tells the program what it's supposed to do. Now, once this button called calculate is clicked, this is what will be done. The program will request for a radius. Then I'll just click on calculate. So I can run the code here. So this is a button that helps me to run the code. You can see the name of the button is called start. So this is just an interface for that. So if you understand what we mean by an interface, okay, or let's add one more. So let me add another interface so we can understand this clearer. So this is just an interface and we call it circumference and area. So now let me add another interface. So I want to call this, I want to call this, let's look at another interface. What is the formula for calculating the area of a triangle? I think it's half base times height. So now in this case, if I want to calculate the area of a triangle, half base times height, here I must supply two what? I must supply two inputs, right? I must supply two inputs. So to calculate the area of a triangle, I need the breadth, right? Sorry, triangle, I need the base and the height. So I can simply add a label. So let me say I want to add a label to capture the height from me. You can see I can add a label. All I just need to do is what? Change the caption height. So you can see I have height there. To calculate the area of a triangle, apart from the height, I need the base too, the length of the base. So I can also have another label. So let's call it base or enter base or whatever. So enter base. It's anything that you type there that appears in the caption for the what? For the label. So let me call it enter height. So I think it makes more sense that way. So you know that, okay, I'm to enter the height here. The label is to add a descriptive text. So now I need a text box to capture that height that will be entered by the user. So I can add a text box. So enter height. So let me add a text box to what? To capture that height. So whatever height that I must enter the value of the height. Enter height tells me that I need to enter height, but at least I also need where to enter that height. So that's what the text box is for. So we have this as what? Text box. We need another text box to receive the base. So now let's add another text box to capture the what? The base. So we can see that. All right. So I need to change the text. So to nothing, it is empty. So this would capture the what? Height and the base. But remember, I also need to display the output. So for me to display the output, that means I need a label to tell me, okay, output is or area is or something. Whenever I just want to add a descriptive text, what should come to my mind is what? Label. So area is, so I need somewhere to display the area. So I can add a text box that will help me display the area. Also, to display my area, I can make use of a label, but let's just leave it as a text box. I will show us how we can also use a label to what? To display an output. So we need to change the text for this to be empty so that the value of my area can be what? Displayed there. And don't forget, I said without the command buttons, right? Nothing will be done. Without the command button, nothing will be done. So now let me add a command button. So I will only add one here because I've shown us how to add command buttons. So let me just call this compute. I think that is a more appropriate word to use when you want to calculate the area of it. You can say compute, you can say evaluate, you can say calculate. So they basically mean the same thing. So let me just say compute. So compute. So you can see the name as what has changed. So this is an interface. Okay. This is for area of a triangle. So I can change the what? The name of the caption. Area of what? Of a triangle. Area of a triangle. So you can see the name as what has changed. So that is how you design an interface. Let's come back to the slide. I'm not completing the code yet because there are some things that I still need to introduce you to. We have what is called variables. We have what is called operators. So you need to know some of these things before you. But I believe this should help us to understand what I mean by what drawing an interface. So am I communicating? You can reply via chat. I hope we are together. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. So now let's come back to our slide. So that's what we mean by adding controls to your what? To your form. So what are we going to be covering in this class? So this slide will show us the fundamental features of Visual Basic. Of course, we have more than this, but for the purpose of this class, so we should, at the end of this class, sorry, let me state this. Visual Basic will be taught today and next week because we can't use a class for Visual Basic unlike some of the other chapters that you have treated. So after our class today, we'll still meet next week, Tuesday, for the final class on Visual Basic. So we should understand what we mean by a keyword, or let's just say keywords. Visual Basic has some reserved words, which are also called keywords. So we should know what we call constants and variables. We have what we call data types, and we have what we call data declarations. So we'll see that. Operators and expressions, we'll see what they are. Assignments, how do you assign values to your variables? We'll see how that is done. So input statements, output statements, program comments, or I think there are some that I didn't list here. So we'll also see what we call loops. We'll see decision making, we'll see loops, and we'll see arrays in Visual Basic. So I think the last part of the course, I didn't actually include those ones here because here I'm just talking about the fundamental features. So the decision-making part of Visual Basic, what we mean by loops, and what we also mean by arrays will be covered next week by the grace of God. But for today, so we should be able to understand some of these features that I've mentioned here. So when you say a keyword is a word or phrase that is exclusively reserved or kept for special use by what? By Visual Basic. Well, it's not just Visual Basic, okay? Every programming language has what we call what? Keywords. That means these words are specially reserved for that language and you can't use those words anyhow. These words are specially reserved for that particular programming language and they cannot be used anyhow. So for Visual Basic, we have a number of these words. We have dim, D-I-M, which is used when you want to declare a variable. We have sub, so you can a sub can be a module, beginning of the sub, then you can end the sub. This is where this module is starting from, and this is where this module is ending. We have while. These are words that I cannot use anyhow. While, for, when, if, single, double, long, variant, dates, etc. So we have many more. For, do you get it? So these are words that I cannot use anyhow because when you use these words, you already have a meaning in Visual Basic. When Visual Basic sees dim, it knows that, oh, Dim is used in Visual Basic to make declarations. Oh, that means you want to declare something. That is the meaning of dim to Visual Basic. So you can't use it for something else. If you are trying to use it in another way, it might give you an error that no. Dim is one of the reserved words of Visual Basic, and this is how it is what used. You can't use it anyhow. You can't use it as a variable name. So one thing you should take note of is that what keywords cannot be used as variable names. Now, what are variable names? If you say keywords cannot be used as variable names, it is also important for us to understand what variable names are. So we'll see that in the next few slides. Constants, I will come back to constants, but let's go to variables first. All right. So what is a variable? A variable is a location or area in the computer's memory where data is stored. It is the name given to the location in the program. It is the name given to the location in the program. Okay, this is what is meant by what? Variable name. You can change the contents of a variable, but its name and storage area are reserved for use until. Okay, don't let me waste too much time on that. So let me just give you examples. For example, variables are used by Visual Basic to hold data needed by your application. So now let's come back to those forms that we created. We have two forms here. This for circumference and area, and we have this for what? Area of a triangle. Now, do not forget that I made mention of something. I said radius must be entered, right? If I'm going to enter the radius, that means there must be something that is storing that value that I will enter for radius. Do you get it? That is called a variable. So a variable is used to what? To hold data or information that will be needed by the program. I want to calculate the circumference and area of a circle. I need to supply the radius because without the radius, I cannot calculate the area and the what circumference. So I need to enter this radius. And once I enter this radius, there must be something to help me hold the value of that radius that I've entered. If I enter 7, that means there should be something to store that value 7. If it is 8 that entered, there should be something to store that value 8. If it is 20, there should be something to what? To store that value. That is what is called a variable. A variable is used to hold or store data or information that will be needed by the what? Program. I think that is very clear. So, for example, I would show us how we use a variable in Python. Sorry, in Visual Basic. Sorry, Python is another programming language. So I will show you how we use a variable in Visual Basic. I have some examples in the slides. All right. So variables are used by Visual Basic to hold what? Information needed by what? Application. We have some rules that you must follow when you want to assign a variable name. The first character must be a letter. So let's say I can say that value that will be supplied as radius. Let me create a variable name. That is a name that is not any part of the what of the keywords for Visual Basic. So let me create a variable that will help me store the value that the user will enter. So I can call it radius. Another person can say, oh, I'm not using radius to store mine. I want to use R to store mine. That is your own variable name, which is fine. Another person can say, no, I'm not using radius and I'm not using R. I want to use rad. It's just a variable name. It can be anything, it depends on you. Any name that you feel is convenient for you to use as your variable name, you can use it. But the fact that it can be any name does not mean that there are no rules for what? For forming a variable name. The first character must be a letter. I said a value will be entered for radius, and I might say, oh, I want to store that value as R. R is a letter, it's fine. Another person can say, I'm using rad. That is fine. That is a valid variable name. Your variable name, what is most important is that the first character must be a letter. They may include letters, numbers, and underscore only. Another can say, oh, I'm not storing my radius R1. It is acceptable. Maybe in a case where you have two red die, and you say, oh, let me differentiate R1. Another person, you have a second rate as R2. It is a valid variable name. Why? It is starting with a letter, that is acceptable. And a variable name can also contain a number. So R1 is a valid variable name. And if you know that you want letters, that is allowed. Your variable name that can be added to a variable name apart from letter and number. You can't add comma to a variable name. You can't add question mark that after all it's a variable name. I can give it anything. You still have to guide yourself on what? On forming a variable name. You can't add a plus, you can't add a parenthesis. So a variable name can only include your letter plus your number and underscore. But don't forget that it must start with what? With a letter. You cannot use a reserved word as a variable name. I think I've mentioned this earlier. Words that are reserved by Visual Basic are called Visual Basic keywords. So you cannot use them as what? As a variable name. And yes, a variable name can be anything, but you still have to guide yourself and make sure that the variable name is no more than 255 characters. For example, US, that is 6 letters, that is 6 characters. So you see, you can use up to what? 255 characters as a variable name. So it shouldn't exceed 255 characters. In fact, I even see no reason why anyone should want to use up to that number of characters as a variable name. So examples of valid variable names are in VBA, tax rate. Is it valid? Yes. Why? Because it's starting with a letter. It can consist of letters and numbers. In fact, this does not even contain letter, but it's still fine. And it's not a reserved word, so that makes it a valid variable name. Now look at the second one that I have, tax underscore rate. That is also a valid variable name because my variable name can contain what? An underscore. Tax rate 2. I have letters plus number 2. Yes, that is correct. And I have CSC 201 underscore A1. That is also a valid variable name. Why? Because it consists of just letters, numbers, and underscore only. And it is starting with what? With a letter. So that makes it a valid variable name. We'll write the code for those forms that we created so you can understand what we mean by what? A variable name and keyword. We've seen dim, which I said you used to declare a variable. So we'll see how dim is used and we'll see how a variable is declared. All right. So we'll see how a variable is declared, how dim is used to declare a variable, and how a variable is used to what? To hold a value. So we'll see all this. Yes, I said I will come back to constants. So we also have what is called a constant. A constant is a numeric or string value that does not change in a program. So if there is any value that you know that will not change throughout the execution of the program, you can declare that as a what? As a constant. Meaning that this value is always going to be this. For example, let's look at finding the area and circumference of a circle. We know that pi has a constant value regardless of anything. The value of pi will not change. The value of pi is always 3.142857, I think 142857. Yes, so that value is not going to change at every point in time. That is always going to be the value of my pi. If I'm calculating my radius, it's that same value. If I am calculating my circumference, it's the same value for pi. So I can declare that pi as a what? As a constant. We'll see how that is done as well. So we have two types of constants, numeric and a string constants. A numeric constant is just a number. It can be an integer or a real number. Integer, that's a number without decimal points. A real number, maybe, for example, looking at the value of pi. Pi is 3.142857. So of course, I know that is a real number because it has a decimal point. So this is how you define your constants. Const, we have const, that is a keyword in what? In Visual Basic. When your program says const, const, it knows that, oh, you are trying to what? To define a constant. So all you just need to do is const, which is the keyword to define a constant, followed by the name of that constant equal to this value. So looking at this, we have const, that is a VB keyword, telling me that I want to define a constant. Pi equals to what? 3.159. So I've defined a constant value for pi. That means wherever I want to use that value of pi, I can just multiply by what? Pi. It's just going to check. The value of pi has been defined or declared up there. So it's just going to assign that value of 3.159 to what? To pi. Wherever I want to what? I want to use it. So now, using variables in a program. Before I use a variable in a program, it is important for me to what? To declare that variable. Before I use a variable in a program, it is important for me to declare that variable. Now, for example, I want a variable called surname. I want a variable called surname to store my surname. The variable must first of all be declared. And remember, I told us that dim is used to declare a variable. So we have dim surname as dash. So that in place of that dash, we have what we call data type. We have several types. We have what we call data type. Any value that you are trying to what? Any variable value that you are trying to supply, or any variable that you are trying to use must belong to a what? A data type. So we need to talk about data types. Let me see where I have that here. Okay. So we need to talk about data types. These are the data types that we have in the Visual Basic. Data type refers to what? Is the attribute of a variable or field that determines what kind of data it can hold. We have Boolean. Boolean is an example of data type. It only holds two kinds of values, either true or false. So our Boolean can only hold true or what? Or false. We have integer, which is a number without a decimal point. We have long, which is what? Also an integer, but it has a larger range than what? Than an integer. Well, the difference between an integer and long in Visual Basic is that integer has a range in Visual Basic, and the range is from minus 32,768 to 32,767. So if you are using a value higher than 32,767, it is better to declare that value as what? As long. It is a longer integer than what? It is a longer integer than integer. So integer has the size of the integer is 2 bytes, which is 16 bits, while the size of long is 32 bits, which is what? 4 bytes. So we have single and double, just as we have integer and long, we have single and double. Single is for decimal numbers, same thing with double for real numbers or decimal numbers. But double has what? A larger range than what? Than single. So other types that we have: currency, date, object, string, and variants. So now, what is a string value? I believe we know what. Okay, now let's look at several kinds of values. My name, Abass. We know it is not an integer, right? The name, Abass, is not an integer. Okay, I should go back to the range of an integer. Don't worry. I will share the slides with your course reps, okay? So I will share the slides with your course rep. I will send my WhatsApp number to your course reps so I can share the slides with them. So now, looking at when you want to store a name, we have seen string, we have seen integer, we have seen long, we have seen single, we have seen double, we have seen all that. They are different because the data that you are trying to work with, we have different kinds of data. If you are working with a name, for example, my name is Abass. Abass, obviously, that kind of data is not an integer. I know Abass is not an integer. Abass is not a decimal number. Do you get it? That value consists of just characters. It's like a text. So the best data type to hold that kind of value is what? String. When you say a string, what is a string? A string is a what? Is a collection of characters. So the best kind of data type to hold that variable, surname is a variable. The best kind of data type to hold that variable is what? Is string. Looking at radius, for instance, I know that my radius can be what? Can be a decimal number. I can say enter radius. My radius can be 7.5. That tells me that there must be a data type for my radius. And that data type is not string because I know that this is now a number. So and a number is not a string. So I have to consider a different data type to store my radius. So if I was declaring my radius, it would have been dim radius as. If I want only an integer value to be entered or just integer values, I will dim it as what? Dim radius as integer. If I want my radius to take decimal numbers, I can say dim radius as single. If I know that my radius can take larger number than what? A larger number than what single can accommodate, I will say dim radius as what? Double. I cannot dim radius as string because the value that I'm expecting to be entered for radius is not a string value. But my name can be a string value. Dim surname as string. I can dim your name. Dim name as what? As string. But you can't dim your name as what? An integer because your name is not a numeric value. And your name is not, I can't dim it as single because your name is not a what? A decimal number. So you need to understand what you mean by variables. The variable will store the value, but you must tell me the type of data that that variable can what? Can hold. My radius will not hold a string. My surname will hold a string. Abass is a string. And for every string, when you want to assign a string value to what? To my variable, every string must be embedded in what? In a pair of double quotes. My string must be embedded in a pair of what? Double quotes. Please, before I proceed, let me check my YouTube page to be sure that those on YouTube are following us as well. So just give me 30 seconds to check that. Okay, so we have people watching. All right. Please, can we still see my screen? Can we see my screen? Reply via chat. Okay, all right, thank you. So, using variables in a program, dim surname as string, then I can now, once you what? Once you have declared the type of your variable, so you can give a value to that variable. Do you get it? I've said, oh, there will be a variable called surname and it will be of string type. Then I can now say this is the value for that variable. But if I don't declare that variable, I might not be able to give a value to that variable. They call it an assignment. I am on this slide, I am assigning the value Abass to what? To surname. Now, label.caption equals to surname. You see that when we're working with labels, we said there is a caption property that helps it to add a text. If this label.caption equals to surname, what this will just do is it will look for wherever I have label 1. It will now change the caption of that label to what? To surname. And what is the value stored in surname? Abass. So this is going to change the value of what, or the caption of label 1 to what? To surname. Don't worry, we'll see how that is done. So you see that in the first one did not require me to what? To enter a value for surname. Yes, I have declared the surname as string, fine. But the first one, I statically assigned the value Abass to what? To surname. What if I want it to be dynamic? I don't want the surname to always be Abass. I want the user to be able to input what that surname is supposed to be. So VB provides a function called input box, which will display as a dialog box on your screen and take inputs from you. So this input box, you can see, I can give it a message, enter your surname. So you see it that, oh, what I'm entering here is what? My surname. This optional is actually the name of that input box. We'll see how that is used. That optional, you may put that and you may not. You get it? You may or may not put that part. That's why I just left it as optional. But that will be the name of the what? Dialog box that is appearing to you. We'll see how that is done as well. So to display output, the content of a variable can be displayed by assigning the variable to a property, just as we saw, or passing the variable as an argument to a dialog box function. Look at this. Here we have input box. VB has input box that allows me to enter a value. So whatever value I enter, I can then assign it to a what? To a variable. VB allows that. Also, when I want to display a message, VB has a dialog box function called message box that can be used to what? To display outputs. So this is what the syntax looks like. You don't need to stress yourself too much. All these things that I've mentioned, we will see how they are what? How they are used in the VB. We have statements and expressions. This one is just a statement. A statement is a line in your VB program. So start time is equal to now. This one is just telling me that, okay, assign now, the value now to what? To start time. If I want to make a calculation, energy is mass times light speed raised to power 2. So we need to understand some things. The assignment statement stores information. For example, where we saw surname equals to Abass, what we have there is what? Is an assignment statement. And what does that mean? Assign the value Abass to what? To surname. Surname is a variable. So it's a variable equals to what? This value. Surname equals to Abass. That surname is a variable. Abass is the value. So you have the format as variable equals to what? Value. We'll see how that is done. So okay, I just mentioned that the syntax for assignment, we can see that here. Generally, you have three methods of getting or assigning values to variables. You can read the value in from a file. You can ask the user to type it in the value, and you can assign a value within the program. I think I've shown you how you assign the value within the program. Surname equals to Abass. This is how I assign the value within the program. You can, they said we can ask the user to type in the value. Once we use input box, this allows the user to type in the what? The value. So you can see. Or you have a file where you want to read your values from. That is operating at a more advanced stage than the first two. Sorry, than the last two. Data types, we've seen that. So now, what happens when I have several data types, several variables? If you go back to this, now let's come back to this. Radius must be captured. Area must be captured. Circumference must be captured. That means I have three variables here. My radius, my area, and my what? Circumference. Okay. So now, remember I told you that when you want to write code, the code, okay, let me complete this before we write any code. So in that case where I have area, circumference, and radius, my radius can be a variable, my circumference can be a variable, my area can be a variable. Why? Because my area will store a value, and I told you anything value is a variable. Area will store a value will be stored as a variable needs to hold that value that will be computed as area. A variable needs to hold that value that will be computed as what? As circumference. So in that situation, I can have three variables. So now what I just need to do is deem this variable as this type. Remember that is the syntax, comma. If you have another variable, this one as this type, blah blah blah. So now these are examples. Interest rate. We know that our rate is usually, the interest rate is usually a decimal number. So interest rate are single, yes. Followed by as. That's the syntax for Visual Basic. You cannot change it. If you type something else, it will give you an error. That's the syntax for data declaration in Visual Basic. Also that once you want to that is allowed by that programming language. Dream interest rate as single. We've seen this before. The best data type for a name is string because a name is not single, a name is not an integer, a name does not belong to the long data type, a name does not belong to the what? Double data type or the currency data type. It's simply a string. A name is a string. Whenever a value is assigned to a variable without the dim statement, we say such is implicitly declared. The best way, don't let me confuse you, the best way to declare a variable is what? Explicitly. So if you read the slide, you will understand what I mean by that. So for constant, this is another way if you want to tell us the type of the constant. Remember the one we saw then was const pi equal to this value. So if you also want to specify the data type for that constant, it is allowed const pi as single equals to what? This value. Or constant tax rate as single equals to what? This value. I can simply say const, that's representing constant, const tax rate equals to 25.00. I can remove the as single. So it is allowed for that. Now, we have what is called operators. You cannot perform any operation. This was one of the reasons why I haven't written any code. I only designed the forms for us because it's important for us to talk about operators. Before three major kinds of operators which will be considered. So I have an acronym for that, which is ARL. One is arithmetic, one is relational, and one is logical. Remember I said that without operators, you cannot carry out some operations. So these operators help you to carry out some operations. So arithmetic operators are used to carry out arithmetic operations. Arithmetic operators are used to carry out arithmetic operations. So Visual Basic has these operators. When I want to add two numbers, Visual Basic has plus to help me add two numbers. It uses plus. When I want to subtract one number from the other, Visual Basic has the minus operator that helps me to do that, which is just the minus symbol that we're already familiar with. We have exponentiation operator, that's raised to power. If I want to say radius raised to power 2, for example, if I'm calculating area of a circle, the area of a circle is what? Pi r squared, which is, you can't just type pi r squared for the computer. If I want to type that, it is what? Area equals to pi times radius times radius. You can see radius in two places. I can simply say area equals to radius raised to power, because Python has a symbol as sorry, Visual Basic has an operator for what? For raised to power. That's exponentiation. So I can easily use that for what? For raised to power. Radius then that operator would come, radius raised to power 2. So it's just like n. It's not actually n. Well, we have that on the keyboard. If you look at 6 on your keyboard, shift 6 should give you that operator. So we have the asterisk for multiplication. That's what VB uses for multiplication. We have the forward slash for division in a Visual Basic. We have the backward slash for interdivision. So what does, when you're using, there's a difference between the forward slash and the backward slash. The forward slash, that's what the one we are familiar with. When I say 3 divided by 2, I know it's 1.5. Do you get it? But if I want to perform integer division, what integer division will do is the numerator and denominator will both be what? Integer values. It will convert both of them to integer values and give, now 3, if I use 3 backward slash 2, it was 3 forward slash 2, I'll get 1. Truncate the decimal part, so I'll get 1. I believe we understand that. If it is forward slash, it will perform the operation as, it will perform it normally, but if it is backward slash, it will truncate the decimal part and only return the what? The integer part. It will first convert the numerator and the denominator to both integer values, then perform the what? Operation. So we have modulus operator, which is MOD in Visual Basic, MOD mode. What that simply does is what? It returns the remainder of the what? Of a division. And remember, just as we have BODMAS in just as we have BODMAS in mathematics, we also have something like that when it comes to performing the arithmetic arranged according to the order of precedence. When you have an expression that contains all these operators, Python Visual Basic has to carry out the exponentiation operation first, followed by multiplication and division. So if there is a backward slash, it does that integer division. Then if there is mode, so the list in the order of precedence is what? Addition and subtraction. So VB starts with exponentiation, followed by multiplication or division, followed by your integer division, the modulus operator, which returns the remainder of an operation, and then plus and minus. So when you want to concatenate two strings, we use the ampersand symbol. We'll see that because I have a number of programs that I have written for us to use to practice in class. So evaluate the following expressions. 6.8 backward slash 2.7. Remember I told you that the backward slash does what we call integer division. It would approximate both the numerator and the denominator to their closest integer values. 6.8 is closest or is closer to 7 than 6, so it will round it up to 7. 2.7 is closer to 3 than 2, so it will round it up to what? To 3. Then it does 3 backward slash 3, which returns 2. But if it was forward division, of course, we know it to perform the normal, to give us the normal calculation. 8.3 backward slash 2.2. 8.3, it will round it down to 8 because it is closer to 8 than it is to what? To 9. So it will round it down to 8. 2.2 is closer to 2 than it is to 3 because it must take both of them to integers. So it does 8 backward slash 2, which is what? 4. There is no remainder. Of course, if there was a remainder, that would have been truncated, but here there is no remainder, so it's fine. Mode, on the other hand, returns the remainder from an integer division. 13 mode 5, it does 13 divided by 5. Both of them are integers already, so there's no need to convert anything. Mode also does integer division. 13 divided by 5, that is 2 remainder 3. Like I said earlier, what mode returns is the remainder of a division, so the answer will be 3. 8.2 mode 2.2, it does integer division and returns the remainder of that division. So it will take both of them to integers 8. That's 8 mode 2. 8 mode 2, that's 4 remainder 0. So it will return the remainder, which is what? 0. We also have what we call relational operators. Some call them comparison operators. You use it when you want to compare values. Is this greater than this? I've entered maybe I want to add, I want to enter two numbers. I've entered the first number, I have entered the second number, then I want to check which of them is greater. So if the first number greater than the second number, then do this. So Python, VB also has, I am so used to Python because that's my main programming language. So please, when I mention that, just know that what I'm saying is Visual Basic, okay? So we have this comparison operators in Visual Basic. Greater than, so that's the operator. Less than, the same operator that we are familiar with in mathematics. So when you want to use greater than or equal to, that is how you represent it in Visual Basic. Less than or equal to, that's how it's represented. When you want to check if two values are equal, so you just use a single equality symbol. And when you want to, okay, if this is not equal to this, you use less than and greater than. That means not less than, not greater than. That means not equal. So that's the not equal operator in Visual Basic. So we have this expression. Now let's see. Value if A is 3 and B equals to 4. A is 3, B is 4. A greater than B, that's 3 greater than 4. Of course, that is false because this one told us that A is 3 and B is 4, so that is false. A equals to B, A is 3, B is 4. Of course, that is false. A less than B, A is 3, B is 4. 3 less than 4, yes, that is true. A less than or equal to B, 3 less than or equal to 4, yes, that is true. So value if A is equal to X and B is equal to X, that's when A and B have the same value. A is not greater than B. So A is not greater than B. A greater than B, that is false. A equal to B, that is true because they have the same X value. A less than B, that is false. Sorry. That is false. So A less than B is false. And A less than or equal to B. X less than or equal to X, that is true. Though X is not less than X, but X is equal to X. So if one of them is true, then you accept it, all right? So X less than or equal to X is what? Is true. So those are relational operators. I also said you call them comparison operators. There are 6: less than, greater than, less than, equal to, greater than, equal to. We have equal to, which is a single to equal to, and we have not equal to, which is combination of my less than and greater than symbols. Also for logical operators, we have up to 6, but the 3 most important for this class are, we have the not, and or. So those are the 3. Now, I call it now, that's my acronym for that. Now, NAO, not, and, or. That also defines their precedence. Not as higher precedence than and. When you have the 3 of them in an expression, the not is evaluated first. After you have taken care of all the nots, then you go to and. Then after and, you go to what? Or. So they have been arranged according to their order of precedence. And when you say not simply negates an operand. Not true. Not true means false. Not false means what? True. All right. And we have and. And is true when both operands are true. If A is true and B is true, then do you get it? So and returns a true if both operands are what? Are true. But if any of them is false, either it is false and true, or true and false, it will return a false. The or operator returns a true if either of its operand is true. Only false or false is false. The others are what? Are true. Only false or false is false. False or true is true. True or true is true. True or false is what? Is true. So these are the logical operators that we have. Visual Basic functions. You have a number of functions that make your work easier to do in a Visual Basic. So see a number of these functions. So we have at the end of this class, we have some projects: a VB program to add, subtract, or multiply and divide two numbers, a VB program to find the average of any 3 numbers, a VB program to calculate simple interest. So let me just write the code to implement one of the 2 forms that we created. so I don't waste your time, because some of you might have another class now, as it is 10 already. So, okay, Esther, I will do me. What does this symbol represent? That symbol is less than and equal to. Should we implement one of them before we call it a day? That if you don't have a class now, should we just implement one of them? You can reply me via chat. Okay. All right. Thank you. So now let's come to one of them. We have created two interfaces, so we can work on any of them. So let's go with this, where we have circumference and area of the circle. If time permits us, we can look at the second one as well. Now, remember I told you that the first thing is to what? Is to design your interface, which is what we have done here. We've added 3 labels, we've added 3 text boxes, and remember I told you that without the command buttons, no action will be what will be performed. So once you have designed your interface and you're on that form, you now have to write the code that will implement each of the what command buttons that you've created. So that part where you have the command button is actually where you write the code that would execute that program. So now I have calculate. That means, because if I click on calculate, something must be done. So the code implementing that, I have to write it. If I click on clear, an action must be performed. So the code that would work with that clear must be what written. And if I click on exit, the code for that must also be what? Must also be written. So now let me see calculate. Just double click on it. So I've clicked on calculate. So once you click on the command button, Visual Basic will generate this for you. Private sub, the name of the button is command 1. That's because I didn't change the name of the button, but you don't have to touch anything that is automatically generated for you. So it's between that private sub and end sub, all right? They are going to write the code that is implementing that calculate. So now, the first thing I have to do is, remember that before you start writing code, you must have done your analysis. I know that calculate, once I click on calculate, it will display the area and the circumference, but I can't calculate the area and circumference without what? Knowing what my radius is. So the first thing is, all the variables that I need, I have to what? Declare them. So let me say radius to store my radius. Area will be printed. Let me separate this, because let me declare it one by one, then I'll show you how you can combine them together later. My radius, I want you to take a decimal number, because it can be an integer or a decimal number. So once you type as, Visual Basic will suggest a number of values for you. So it's left for you to know what can follow. My radius can be a single value, it can be a double value, it can be an integer, it can be long, depending on what I want it to be. If I want it to be decimal, I will go for a single and a double. If I want it to be a whole number, that is an integer, I will go for what? Integer or long. But I want mine to be what? A double or a single. That's a decimal number. But let me go with single. If there was an error, once you write that line, you click on enter. If there was an error, VB will show, okay, now let me introduce an error deliberately. Instead of as, let me type A, all right? Instead of as, I've typed A, so now single. You see, let me click, to me now, I'm done with the line. Let me click on enter, you can see, compile error, expected end of statement. So once you have written a line and you're trying to go to the next line and you click on enter, if there's an error in the previous line, Visual Basic will give you a prompt message that there's an error somewhere, which you have to figure out. It's telling me where the error is. You can see this A is in blue. Do you get it? The whole line is in red, but where the error is, it's giving me in a different color. So I know that there's an error here. So let me come back to it because I know it should be as. So I'll come back to the line and click enter. You can see the error has disappeared. That means I have declared a variable called radius that would help me store that value called radius. I know that I will also calculate area and circumference. I can dim them, but I don't want to dim them yet because it will look like I already know the code. I want you to see how you will think on your own to know what you need to declare and what you don't need to declare. Most times, your outputs that you are printing, you must declare them. Your inputs must be what? Declared. But let me leave that for now. And I said, I have a variable called radius, which is of the single type. But remember that the value for my radius should be what? Will be supplied in this text box. Because when I run it, this text box, what is the name? Text 1, you can see the name here. You can see, if you look at the name caption, you would see. You can see name is text 1. So the value in this text 1 will be my radius. So I will go to the code. Let me click on calculate. I will go to the code that I have a variable called radius, but that radius, the value for that radius, if I say radius equal to 7.8, yeah, I have given my radius a value, but I'm not giving it a value from here. I want it to be any value that is entered in my text box. So I will do this. The name of the object, I will come back to it if I'm not certain of the name, if I don't know what the name is. So you can see I will scroll up. The name is text1. Text1. So I can go back to my code. That value in text1 dot text, that's whatever value that is in it. Radius is what? Text1 dot text, meaning that whatever value that I have in text1, because remember I told you text1, look at text1, it has a property called text. It has a property called text, and whatever value that you have there is what is the text value. So now that my radius is what I have in text1 dot what dot text. Don't forget that we have other text boxes. This is text2, you can see the name here. This is text3. Once I click on it, text3, I have the name here. But the value entered in text1 is my radius. So that's why I used text1 and not the other text boxes. Now, after I've gotten my radius, the next thing is with my radius, I can calculate my area. Area, okay, that means I need something to store the value of my area. Area equal to, I will now think that no, area is another variable, but I have not declared the type. Can you see? So I will now have to come back here that, oh, I have to declare the type of my what? Area. So dim area as what? My area will be single. So now I've dimmed area as single. I can now say area equals to, what's the formula for area of a circle? Pi r squared. Then to make me remember again that I need pi, but pi has a constant value. Let me give my pi a value. I just want to show you how programmers think. It's not just that you start writing code. I need a constant value. So I'll say const. I told you we have seen the syntax of how you initialize the constant value. Constant pi. This is the variable name. That's the name I'm giving it. It can be anything. If you like, call it PIE. It's a name. So I can call it P. What matters most is I know what I'm using it to represent. So const pi equal to, you've seen how this is used, 142857, right? 2587 or 2587. Okay, anyway. So I've given my pi a value, and I said whatever the user enters in text1 should be my radius. That means whatever you enter in text1 should be my radius. Now let me now calculate my area. My area is what? I've given my pi a value, so I can use it. I can multiply it by my radius now because the radius will be captured. I said my radius is whatever I have in text 1. So area equals to what? Pi times radius times radius. This is one way because it is pi r squared. Remember I told you that VB also has what? An exponentiation operator. So I can do radius raised to power 2. There's no problem. I can say radius times radius is still radius in two places. It is fine. So anyone I decide to use, or maybe okay, we'll try both. So let me use the raised to power first. I have raised to power 2. Okay, my area is pi times radius raised to power 2. You see that before I can use a variable, I must have declared it. Before I used radius, I have declared it. Before I used pi, I have told the computer what pi is. So before you use any variable, you must declare that variable before you can use it. Now, I want to calculate my circumference. Circumference equal to, I will now check. But I've not yet declared circumference. So that should be the next thing for me to do. Dim, before I can use any variable, I must declare it. Dim circumference as what? Single. Now I can say circumference is a variable. And what is the value? 2 pi r. 2 times pi, that's 2. You can't just type 2 pi r. There is something connected there. It is 2 times pi times r. If you say 2 pi r, the computer will give you an error. All right. So 2 times pi, because pi already has a value, I've given it a value, times radius. There's something I'm supposed to do, but I want you to see how you write a program. So I want something to happen first before I tell you that. Now you will see that this line will receive the value entered in text box 1. This one, after it has obtained that value, this one will calculate area, this one will calculate circumference. The next thing is the circumference and area should be displayed. So now look at this. This is text 2. That's why I want the area to be displayed, right? So I will now say, look at what I want to do next. Text 2. The text that should be in text 2 is what? Area that I calculated is equal to what? Area. Look at this. For input, the value in my text will go to my variable. I have calculated area and circumference. Now, the value that should now be in my text should be my area. That is output now. That means area has been calculated. The value that is in that area should go to text 2. Radius equal to text 1. The value in text 1 should go to radius. Text 2 equals to area. The value in area, because I have calculated area, should go to what? Text 2. Conference should go to text 3. So text 3 dot text equals to what? Text 3 dot text equals to what? Circumference. So I think with this, I'm kind of done. So this is the code for that. So Claire, what do I want Claire to do? This is another command button. I will double click it. Can you see? The name is command 2. So what do I want it to do? I want it to empty the value of the radius, empty the value of the area, and empty the value of the circumference so that a new value can be entered for radius. So that means I want it to remove the value here. So what I will just do in that case is I will set each of them to be empty. When I click on this, empty my text 1. Text 1 dot text is equal to nothing. Can you see? Empty. I'm not giving any value. Text 2 dot text equal to empty. Text 3 dot text equal to empty, meaning I want to declare those values. Exit. What do I want exit to do? I want exit to close the application. So all you just need to type for that is end. End is another keyword in Visual Basic that helps you to end an application or a program. So with this, I think I've written the code to implement each of the commands. All right, we have 3 command buttons. Calculate, I've written the code for that. Clear, I've written the code for that. And exit, I've written the code for that. So once I have written the code, then I can now run. So you can see now when I run it now, it's now showing it separately. It's not longer showing the form. I have run it, you can see that it is different. I can't edit this. If it is the form, I can edit, but it's now showing it as a what? As a running application. So let me enter my radius. If my radius is 7, that's the only thing that I need to enter. Then let me calculate. You can see area is 154, circumference is 44, which is correct. So if I click on clear, what did I write for clear? Clear should clear. It should change the text 1 to empty, text 2 to empty, text 3 to empty. So once I click it, you can see everything is cleared. And when I click on exit, this is the code for exit, end. So when I click on exit, you can see it has what? Disappeared. So that is that. Did we see that? So text1.text. You have another keyword that you can attach, which is val. It does not mean it's not changing anything. That's the value that is in what? In text1.text. Either I leave it as text1.text or I say val, that's the value in text1. There's no problem. So now let's run it with another value. Let's say 14. That's the only thing that I need to input, right? So we have calculate, all right? The area is 616, yes. If you look at that is the area for that is the area when your radius is 14. That is correct. And this is the what? The circumference, 88. Yeah, I can remember. So you can okay, we are still on calculate. We can clear and we can what? Exit. So that is that. Do we understand that? You can reply via the chat before we. Are we together? Are we together? Okay, thank you. So let me check on those that are streaming. Okay, I think they are following as well. Okay. So the final one we'll be writing before we call it a day is let's just look at one. Okay, we already have a area of a triangle. Let's just do that. I think close as cleared. So let me just add two numbers then. Add two numbers to help us understand them better. The form I designed earlier is cleared. So to add two numbers, we need to get the first number. We need the text box to get the first number. We need the text box to get the second number. We can add labels to let the user know what they are supposed to input. You can see I said label just to enter a descriptive text. So a label that will tell the user enter first number. The name is label 4, have you? Enter first number. Oh, sorry, I need to show us how to save our project. So enter first number. I need another label that will let the user know that they should enter a second number. So enter second number. Please, you guys should remind me next week when we have a class that I need to explain to you how you would work with your logbook based on the assignments that you've been given. Please send me, you guys can remind me next week so I don't forget, because I need to explain to you how the workbook should be filled. So text 4, this should be cleared so that it will receive the first number from the user. I need another text box to get the second input from the user. So now let me clear that. All right, so this will get the first number, this will get the second number. Then I need somewhere to store the result of the operation. So maybe I want to display the results here. Okay, so let me call it the results will be, so the text should be empty when I launch it. So a label, so let me just add a label to know what is there. So let me call it results. So let me call it results. All right, so now let me just I don't want to add too many buttons. So the button is the same with what we did there. So let me call it add button. Is any name, I can give it any name, add. So I've designed the interface. So the next thing is what? To click on my command button so that I can write the code that will do that for me. I've not closed the previous this thing. I have command 2 there. Okay, let me just we have to okay. Okay. So sorry, let me quickly design that. So just drag. So let me clear that. So let me add another text box. So this one will store the results. Label. I can expand this so you can see. Oh, sorry, it's a label that I want to use. So let me call it, it's just this one is a label. You can say num1. I believe you know what that means. That means enter num1. So we have this num2. I will call it num2. That's, or you can say enter second number. It's a label. It's anything that you have there that will be displayed to the user. So you can make it anything. So I have the third label, results. I'm trying to be fast so I don't waste too much of your time. And we have a command button. Without the command button, we won't be able to run any code. So now let me call that add, because we're adding two numbers. It can be any name. All right, so I need to click on this so that I can write the code. You can see I told you this will appear. Don't change anything that appears. All you just need to do is write the code. We need the first and the second numbers must be entered. So let me say being first to what? To store the first number. That means the first number I want to store it as first. Then let me create second to store the second number. Okay, so after the first has been supplied, but what is that first? First is what? The value in my text1.text. You've seen that text1.what? Text. What is second? Because I said second is a variable. Second is what? Is the value in my second text. That's text2.text. Text2.what? Text. After that, I need to add them together, and there should be something storing the value. Sorry. Do you get it? I'm not just doing all the declarations. You are thinking as a programmer. Oh, I need to add the first and second numbers, but the result must be saved somewhere. Oh, that means I need to introduce another variable. So let me say dim results, or you can call it res. I know what that, you know what that means. Dim results as what? Single. We call it res. So what is this res going to do? Res is going to add, can you see? Res is equal to what? First plus second, because first would have been, value for first would have been entered, value for second would have been entered. So res is supposed to add them together. Okay. So after res adds them together, then text3 should now display this output. So then text3.text, that's the text that should appear in text3, is equal to what? Res. That is it. So now let's run it and see. So let's say we have 878 and second number we have 98. The result should give us 176. That's correct. Please, are we together? Yes, you click on the toolbox and drag any control you want to the form. All right, so that is that. But remember that for this, I didn't add end button and I did not add clear button. So that's why we can only see add. I can't clear or add. If I had added clear, I would have just cleared the values so I can input new values, but I didn't add the clear button. So you can add that. All right. So in the end, if you want to save your project, so before you can save the project, you have to, okay, close that interface. So now if I want to save the project, all I just need to do is click on File, Save Project As. All right. The project has a form. So if you want to give that form a name, add numbers. So you can give the form a name. If you have several forms, you can save each of the forms, add numbers. All right, that's the name of the form in that project. Remember I told you earlier that your project can have several forms because a form is just an interface. When you're writing a complex application, definitely there will be many interfaces. So each of these interfaces is like a form. All right, so you can have, so for each form that you have, you can save each form. Then now save the old project. What's the old project? So I can say the old project is class work or something, class work or something. So save. So that is it. Since I have saved it now, then I can what? Close. You can see it didn't tell me to save my work because I've already saved it. So if I want to work on it again, once you launch this, please, we are at the end of the class. I'm sorry for taking your time. So let's just see. Okay. You can see I launched it, a new project appeared. But if I want to continue a project that I was working on, because I have saved it, I can easily open it. I saved it as classwork now, so I can open it. Can you see? Then if I want to see the form, it's back. So that's how you save a project. All right, so thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your patience and for attending the class. We have come to the end of the class. So this video will be available on the YouTube page. So anytime you want to make reference to it, you are free to access it on my page. Let me see. Okay, so it's on my page, which is Akada Celeb. So if you check Akada Celeb on YouTube, you'll see it there. So see you guys next week. Bye. If you want to save it in PDF format, then the deadline for the assignment is next week. Don't worry, we'll see what we can do as regards that.